E3 is like Christmas for gamers, except instead of Santa, it's companies, and instead of assorted presents, it's all video game stuff. And instead of gifts wrapped with love, it's products that cost money. It's a time of surprise and anticipation, showing up to an E3 presentation you might have been waiting for all year, especially when it was cancelled last year. You're all excited, waiting for them to dramatically unveil something that maybe you've been asking for all year that you probably deserve because it's the only thing on your wish list, and you've been a good boy who brushed his teeth twice a day and always did his homework and always took out the garbage on time, and then it finally rolls around and it's an avalanche of FPS games, half of which you already knew existed, and some multiplats and expansions for games that you don't care about, and that's when you realize that you're a goddamn adult, and no matter how good of a boy you are, and no matter how hard you work, and no matter how much restraint you have in not eating Reese's Pieces for breakfast every day, it doesn't even matter, because nobody, least of all video game companies, care about you at all, and 90% of the driving factors behind every single decision they make is a chart that was drawn up by some old guy in a suit, and the other 10% is just unfortunate circumstances on the part of the artists who just don't feel like making Banjo-Kazooie anymore, and every E3 that rolls around is just another reminder of that. This year I went into E3 with fairly minimal expectations and it was still pretty underwhelming, but I feel like I should qualify this a little bit. You see, video games cost money and money is finite. I'm not in danger of homelessness or poverty or anything like that, but I don't have infinite money either, and that's the thing. It's a little harder to get excited for games when you know you can only afford like 3 of them, so to blow me away, E3 needs at least 1 or 2 mind-blowing announcements that so clearly outshine the rest of them. Something where I go, oh, okay, I'll give you 90 Canadian dollars for that. So what did this E3 have that satisfies that prerequisite? Well, there were some things. Before we talk about actual E3, let's talk about some not E3 stuff. Apparently there's a new version of Doki Doki Literature Club, which is hilarious. I can't wait for the people who don't know anything about the original to play it for the first time, especially the Nintendo fans, because it's coming to consoles. Summer Game Fest with my boy Jeff Keighley, a number of things were announced there. Kojima announced the director's cut of Death Stranding, which is interesting to me because that game was already very long, perhaps too long. So to make it even longer would be a huge gamble, so unless the new stuff is actually really cool, like new gameplay mechanics or somehow making the story make 12% more sense, I don't know if it'll be worth it to me. I don't think I'll be buying a PS5 for it anyway because they still cost 600 Canadian, so if I do get it, it'll probably be the PC version, which will hopefully come out, or it'll be later when they price drop the PS5. If you saw my E3 predictions video, you may remember I talked about the conspiracy theories that suggested Kojima was jumping ship to Xbox for his next game, which would have been crazy, and while this news doesn't necessarily disprove that, I guess it doesn't help either. What was really cool was this video of Sam looking over this Shadow Moses looking base with armed guards walking around, then he fiddles around with a cardboard box. The symbolism here is beyond blatant and intentional, and yet somehow a lot of people interpreted this as a tease at a Kojima-made Metal Gear or Metal Gear type game. In all likelihood, the reality is the total opposite. For better or worse, he handled Metal Gear with care, but now he's done with it. He might have some fond memories, and perhaps he likes to reminisce, but he's moving on, and we should too. They also had Elden Ring, which is an open-world Dark Souls written by George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones. This is supposed to be one of those mind-blowing super games that will last throughout the ages. People lost their minds when they announced this, and even as an outsider, it was nice to see. I've been hesitant to play any Souls game because apparently all of them are terrible. Every Dark Souls fan is super opinionated on which of the games are actually good, and while they can't all agree on which games are the best, what they all have in common is that they seem to fucking hate the other ones. This is easily one of the most bizarre video game fan bases I have ever been a witness to. In my case, I enjoy challenge. My first time through Doom Eternal was on Nightmare, so yeah. I'd say I'm more than happy with getting abused by video games, but from what I understand, some of the Souls games can blur the line between actual difficulty and bullshit artificial difficulty. In the case of Elden Ring, I hope it's less like that, but still super intense. In the name of being more open-minded and trying new things, this year might be the year that I start gambling on games, like I start buying and playing games that I'm completely unfamiliar with, and maybe Elden Ring will be one of those. Ubisoft's conference was a goddamn travesty, but that's Ubisoft. A good chunk of it was about games that either people already knew about or some video game based TV shows. They started out with a Rainbow Six game with aliens and they spent a billion years talking about it. From what I understand, it's a shooting game. Then they showed off Rocksmith. You may remember Rocksmith as sort of an evolution of Guitar Hero. It was basically Guitar Hero except with an actual guitar as a controller. It kinda doubles as a learning tool, and the original game came out years ago, but I guess this is like the new one. I don't know. But then they did something very innovative and forward-looking. They showed off an actually fun video game, Riders Republic. I don't know if I would call this game groundbreaking or crazy. I mean, at first it looked like your run-of-the-mill sports simulator game thing where the entire gimmick is, wow, look at the graphics. That is until I saw the characters put on fucking jetpacks and start flying all over the place like they came from a completely different video game. That was crazy. Immediately the game became 100% better. Just Dance 2022, who the fuck cares? I don't know a single person who plays these games. Obviously they must exist because they keep getting made, but I don't know who or where these people are at. They're like cryptids or something, like they live in a secret society in the subway system, and they only buy these games through human proxies that are possessed by brain fungus like those ants that crawl up to the top of the trees. Assassin's Creed Valhalla add-on, I don't care. TV shows, nobody watches TV, it's 2021. Far Cry 6, people keep saying the graphics look like dog shit, which makes me feel like a crazy person. I mean, maybe the faces aren't like Red Dead 2 level or anything, but look at the foliage and the lighting, man. Of course, graphics won't save a boring ass game, but from what I understand, Far Cry is usually pretty good, so I'm not way too concerned about that. Then, Mario and Rabbids 2. I never played the original, but from what I heard, this game is actually incredibly good, which I didn't expect because it seemed like such a bizarre concept. I miss out on a lot of games because money is finite, but this looked pretty exciting. There was this horrifying Luma-Rabbid hybrid which will haunt me for the rest of my days, but otherwise this game seems very promising. Then they ended the event off with the dumbest thing I have ever seen in my life. The camera walks through this extremely detailed plant life that looks phenomenal, and I thought it was going to be something new and crazy. Turns out, it's a game about James Cameron's Avatar. Really now. I just got done doing a retrospective of E3 2009 where they announced the old Avatar game from back then, so this was kinda hilarious to me. It's like I accidentally predicted it. But who the hell wanted this? I don't even know anybody who cares about the movie anymore, let alone the very concept of a game based on it. Ubisoft's only saving grace was the fact that it was immediately followed up by the Gearbox presentation. You thought Ubisoft was bad? My poor boy. Whereas Ubisoft padded out some of their showcase with movies, Gearbox was entirely dedicated to a single movie, the Borderlands movie with Kevin Hart that I forgot was even being made, and here it is, occupying an entire E3 presentation. Randy, my boy, what actually goes on inside your head? That being said, they had some games there. There was Tiny Tina Wonderland, which is a Borderlands spin-off set in the bunkers and badass universe from the Tiny Tina expansion for Borderlands 2. I don't think they actually showed any gameplay, but apparently there's melee weapons and magic spells instead of grenades. I don't know. Microsoft and Bethesda. In case you forgot, Microsoft bought Bethesda so they could actually have games on their console. They spent 10 fucking minutes talking about Forza. Literally, 10 minutes dedicated to a game about driving cars. I'm still pissed off that the best graphics technology is always reserved for racing games. I just want to step outside the car and look around, dude. That being said, they did show off a lot of games and they got a lot of praise for showing a lot of games, and to some extent I kinda agree with those people. It is best to show games at a gaming event instead of padding it out with movies and TV shows. You can't say that the Xbox doesn't have games anymore, but the question is, how many of those games do you actually care about? They put Captain Jack Sparrow into Sea of Thieves, which is hilarious. I could never have expected that. A good chunk of the games they showed were FPS games, many of which we already knew about. More Far Cry 6, more Halo Infinite, we got some Battlefield 2042. It looks really fun, but from what I understand, Battlefield always does this thing where they show off an extremely intense Michael Bay CG explosion trailer, and then the actual game is just getting spawn killed every 2 seconds and you can't actually play it.
Can I just please play the game? Do you get to play the game in this game?
Maybe I'm just being pessimistic. It wouldn't be the first time, I'm sure you can tell, but if there was a drinking game for how many games this year turned out to be an FPS game, I'd be dead. So many trailers started out with these establishing shots showing you the game's world, and I started guessing if it was an FPS or not, and sure enough, 28 seconds in, they would always pull out a gun, and I'm like, hey! Just to be clear, I do like FPS games, and like I said before, it's hard to mess those games up, but it's also hard to get excited for them when you know that there's a billion of them coming out at the same time, in addition to an already massive backlog of FPS games that already exist. That being said, they did have Psychonauts 2, which I just found out is an exclusive, so that's cool. Slime Rancher 2, I have no idea what a Slime Rancher is, but this looks like one of those stupid fun games like Rabbids that's really weird and barely makes any sense, but is somehow fun to play anyway. They also showed off a CG trailer for Starfield, which is a big Bethesda game set in space. I keep forgetting that people still trust Bethesda to put out quality products, but people seem very excited for this one. I don't want to shit on their parade, but don't be surprised when it comes out and you clip through the entire galaxy because you stepped on a pebble. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out some of the weird, funky indie titles they got coming out. I said a while back that Microsoft might be getting in on Sony's thunder by getting more weird, artsy games on their platforms, and to some extent, that seems kinda true. There was a lot of that. In particular, 12 Minutes looks really fancy. I kinda want to play that one. I'm very split on this showcase because on the one hand, there's a lot of games that I just can't bring myself to care about, but there's also a lot of games that actually look somewhat interesting. I don't know that I would buy a Series X for any of that, so I'm happy that they also put most of their games on PC. Speaking of PC, as I'm writing this, apparently they leaked Windows 11. Looks like shit. Square Enix was there. Now, if you haven't seen the event, I just want to ask you this. What does Square Enix make you think of? Final Fantasy? Dragon Quest? Kingdom Hearts? Well, what about fucking Marvel? Really now, Marvel games. Needless to say, JRPG fans were in love with the 15-minute Guardians of the Galaxy trailer, then they showed off a remastered collection of the first 6 Final Fantasy games for like 20 seconds. It's their flagship franchise and they got a 20-second trailer. Legend of Mana got another 20 seconds, they showed this off at the Switch Direct in February. Then they spent another 4 minutes on a game about Black Panther. There's a Hitman game, 10 seconds for a Nier mobile game, 20 seconds on Final Fantasy mobile games. They showed the Shinra Battle Royale again. Babylon's Fall is made by Platinum Games and they have a voiceover that sounds like Skeletor.
Does the savior of Neo-Babylon stand among us? Let's find out!
They showed off some of the Life is Strange Remaster collection. The original Life is Strange is a cool piece of work. It's not the best game ever made, if you can even really call it a game. It's like a cartoonish David Cage style thing where the gameplay is walking around and navigating dialogue trees. It has a lot of unintentionally hilarious moments, a few intentionally hilarious moments, and a roller coaster of emotions.
Those were my beans, Max!
It's got its fair share of cringe-worthy moments as well, but I did actually enjoy the whole package. I don't know if I'll drop 90 Canadinos on the new one on launch date, but it's on my radar, and I'm glad the devs gave the original games the graphical overhaul they needed by turning down the brightness. The amount of time spent on the Marvel stuff was really weird. Long story short, Square didn't do super well here. I'm not even really a Square fan, and even I thought it was sad. I expected nothing, and I was still let down. PC Gaming Show had a lot of nerdy military strategy games. I'm not going to tell you those are bad games, but I just can't see myself getting into them. Maybe I'm wrong though, maybe it'll unlock something in my brain one day. Chivalry 2, that looks fun. Dying Light 2 is a post-apocalyptic FPS. It seems very story heavy, so that'll be interesting. There were some funky games too, like Ramen. This game looks like it was made by lunatics, so it's probably really fun. I like the look of Vampire the Masquerade. This looks really weird and creepy. To be honest, I don't really remember most of the games they showed there, but what I do remember is that Gaben showed up for like 2 seconds to talk about out Steam demos, and then he hopped back into his gaping hole, never to be seen again. Future Games Show, hosted by Troy Baker and Laura Bailey, covered a bunch of things, a lot of which we already saw. Again, that's kind of the issue with this E3. So many of the showcases spent a lot of time talking about games they already discussed in previous ones. Honestly, Troy and Laura's dumb banter was almost more entertaining than the actual games.
I was doing Rocky. Sorry, I just always wanted to do that.
Considering Laura Bailey played a character who smashed Troy Baker's character to death with a golf club, they had some pretty cute chemistry. They had Steam codes for Chernobylite, but my dumbass was streaming, so I wasn't prepared to grab any, so rip. The one FPS game that I really liked the look of was Warcry. I don't know what it is about it, maybe it's the fact that it looks kinda like Doom, but I just really want to play this. I naively went into the Take-Two Interactive panel thinking that they would be talking about video games. I was thinking if we're lucky, we'll see GTA 6, but in all likelihood it'll be GTA Online crap and GTA 5 ports for next-gen systems. Well, it turns out that they were talking about neither of those things. Take-Two at E3 was a Zoom meeting about the importance of diversity and inclusion. Now, I did a small bit of research on the Take-Two thing beforehand, and I read something about this panel. Admittedly, I kinda skimmed the articles and didn't read too deeply, because I was afraid of leaks and spoilers / I can't read, apparently, and I assumed that this panel would just be a part of their presentation, but no. This was the entire thing, and if you want to call me an idiot for assuming that a game developer at a trade event for the video game industry would be showing some video games, that's fine. For me, the weird thing is that all the major companies talk about diversity and equality because they need to look like they're making a difference so they can deflect legitimate criticism on other fronts, but at least with those other companies, they usually tend to also have some video games. On the other hand, if you've been watching me for a while, you could probably guess that diversity and inclusion are things that I fully support. I think no matter what your race, religion, neurodivergence, gender identity, and/or sexual orientation, you are just as capable and talented and deserving of a place at a AAA game studio where you'll work very long hours to make underwhelming FPS games that will escape our microscopic attention spans within a week. Happy Pride Month, y'all. That being said, I don't know why Take-Two thought that E3 would be the best place to do a panel that didn't talk about any actual games. I'm guessing it's a combination of the unfortunate fact that they truly have nothing interesting to share, but potentially also damage control for GTA's reputation for being edgy and politically incorrect and maybe misogynistic and whatnot. Maybe they thought they needed to score some PR points or something. I don't really know. I don't really care. But it felt really out of place in a trade show which is supposedly about video games. As funny as Take-Two's event was though, at least they were talking about something important and beneficial to society. Because we here at Phantom Beano value diversity and equality. In fact, half of our staff is gay. By which I mean there's only one person and half of him is gay. Mythical Games, on the other hand, is a company I never heard of, so I checked out their show and they were talking about NFTs, so that's how that went. The indie showcase was nice. I like this game with the paper airplane. I feel like this will be a nice game to play when I'm pissed off, which is a lot of the time. I actually kinda enjoyed the Capcom Direct more than I thought I would. Capcom fans were upset because pretty much everything they showed was stuff they already knew about, but that's kind of a pattern with this whole event, so I stopped caring. I still haven't played Resident Evil Village, but they're adding some DLC for that, which is a good move because people seem to like it. Monster Hunter, never played any of these, but they're on my radar. Ace Attorney though, now I like Ace Attorney, although I haven't really played that much of it, but from what I did play, there's no question that these games were written by comic geniuses. I can definitely see why people love these games so dearly, and it's great to see some previously region-locked games get localized. If only some other companies would do that. Then finally, Nintendo. As with everything else, there's always a lot of pressure on the people going last to jump the bar set by the previous showcases. This year, the previous showcases set the bar very, very low. We had a lot of quantity, but there were only a small handful of those games that I could honestly say I really cared about. I shit on Nintendo all the time, but when they're at their best, they kinda shit on everyone else. Unfortunately, Nintendo has not been at their best in a while. That being said, all Nintendo had to do to win this E3 was show off just one good announcement. And they actually showed off a couple. They didn't exactly blow me away, but they definitely won. I wouldn't call it underwhelming, but it wasn't overwhelming either. It was very medium-whelming. That's what this showcase was. They got Kazuya in Smash. It's not the guy I wanted, but I mean, Still better than a fucking Pokemon, which is what I was expecting. I'm guessing they chose him over Heihachi because he was already in PlayStation All-Stars. I think the Smash devs realized that the game is considered an actual fighting game now, which is why they're putting in actual fighting game characters in the fighting game to appeal to those guys. So if the last one is another fighting game guy, I hope it's Johnny Cage from Mortal Kombat. No Metroid Prime 4, but they did assure us that it was still being made. They did, however, show Metroid Dread, so that was pretty neat. Samus has this stealth camo shit to hide from enemies. It looks very intense. They got a new Monkey Balls game that doesn't look like dog ass. I loved those games as a kid, so that's very cool. Mario Party thing with returning mini games and boards from the previous games with really nice looking graphics. Nintendo is great at making their games look really pretty even without 12 teraflops of Xbox power. A new Wario game was announced and it was entirely narrated by Charles Martinet's Wario voice.
Use the spinny whatchamacallit. Ha!
Charles just proved that he can speak actual fluent sentences in character, which means that if they don't use him to voice the Mario movie, they're fucking stupid. Advance Wars, I was not expecting that at all, but it's a welcome surprise. SMT is another JRPG that I'm gonna have to play because my New Year's resolution is to be more open-minded. There was some other stuff they already talked about in the previous showcases, so I didn't care, but what they did show off was Breath of the Wild 2. It looks fantastic. You have floating islands, you got this portal move, extremely creepy atmosphere. It answered some questions, but also raised a bunch more. You'll notice that they didn't show the player character's face during the actual gameplay. Not to mention the intro shows Link getting possessed and Zelda falling off of a cliff, so there's something funny going on. Potentially. If they're planning a crazy mindfuck like MGS2, that'll be interesting as long as they pull it off right. I'm hoping for this to be Breath of the Wild's equivalent to Majora's Mask. The trailers have all been basically promising this extremely uncomfortable, chilling atmosphere, and I sincerely hope they deliver because if they don't, I will be very upset. That was Nintendo's big send-off announcement, and I think it was a pretty smart move, although the game has been delayed back to 2022, so we'll have to wait a little bit longer. So that was E3. It was pretty lame overall, but I think Nintendo definitely won. Not by a massive margin, but by enough of a margin that it's clear. I went into this E3 expecting very little, and looking back, that was the best approach. I wish they announced the last Smash fighter just because Smash fans are just insane, and I'm tired of seeing them everywhere I look. Otherwise, considering devs are still impacted by the shitty global pandemic thing that you might have heard about, it could have been a lot worse, so I'll take it.
Hello, it's me, Wario, and I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm streaming on Twitch every other day, so feel free to follow me over there. I also spend every waking minute of my life on Twitter.com. It's incredibly bad for my mental health, but it's the best place for video updates and for giving me suggestions. So feel free to press like if you enjoyed the video, or press dislike if you're a loser, and I'll see you in the next video. Wahaha!